Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of our Education and Culture Committee. I'm joined by Councilmember Navarro remotely, and Councilmember Juan, who I know will be joining us shortly, but I know that because of time constraints, I wanted to make sure we went ahead and get started. We're going to begin with our Office of Community Use of Public Facilities budget, and I want to thank Ms. Yao, as always, for a great packet and laying out a lot of the decision points. I will say at the outset that we have our Office of Legislative Oversight report, and Ms. Yao will go over that a bit, but did just want to reiterate that when we're looking at the future sustainability of CUP and what it is that we need to do there, we know that some of the recommendations that were made by OLO are going to be incorporated and may not happen with this budget. It really is something where we may have to just allow for things to proceed as they are for now, understanding that there's still judgment calls that need to be made. And it is not easy. It's very interesting. I was just at Tilden Middle School 2 nights ago and was there with the girls basketball team, watching them, and it'll be highlighted in a video that's being done by the council, but was highlighting Asian American girls playing basketball for Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And as I was there and was talking to the coaches, they talked firsthand about the challenges that everyone experiences trying to get to these assets that are so important. They also talked about equity and how even for girls and girls sports versus boys sports, you know, the balance in terms of, you know, just the traditional nature in which we support certain sports and have them going in and how that impacts their ability to get space. All of that is what we need to certainly take in mind as we look at new and innovative ways to try and make sure we're meeting a need that is much larger than the space that we have. And that's the reality as CUP tries to do the best they can with what they have, understanding that everybody wants more, could use more space, and it certainly could be beneficial to our community as a whole. I really want to thank Councilmember Navarro, too, for her work when it came to focusing on a lot of our communities that are economically disadvantaged and marginalized, and making sure that we lifted them up in terms of the ability to access our county spaces as well. So I do want to turn to my colleagues, and then I want to turn to Ms. Bell Pearson if she has any opening comments. But Councilmember Navarro, did you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone. And really want to express my appreciation for CUP's leadership in terms of how to manage this very precious resource. And, you know, when I did create that particular, fund, the idea was for us to think, strategically about how do we utilize our public spaces because they're so limited, and how do we leverage that in order to achieve our overarching policy goals. We still are having so many conversations about out of school time. We're talking about wellness in the schools. We're talking about all of those types of really important, interactions and programs that really support this holistic approach, especially under the context of community schools. And so I really do hope that the work can continue to find the best fit for us here, 2022 and beyond, in terms of how we can best position those important assets, which are our public facilities. But all of you do such an incredible work. I don't envy you. I know it's always difficult, but I do think that if we can be more intentional in aligning those spaces to serve the community in a way that is targeted, and sometimes it's not just for people who are marginalized. It's more about just how do we utilize those spaces to truly boost our policy goals, given that physical spaces are always, in high demand. So I thank you. It's been a real pleasure and honor to work in this space, making that important, but, contribution around beginning to think in this fashion. But I'm sure that those who will follow, and Councilmember Rice and myself and the council, I'm sure they will take that and build upon it to align it even further. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Navarro. I wanted to acknowledge all of our guests that are here with us today. So we've got Ramona Bell Pearson, who's the director of our community use and public facilities, Patty Vitale, who is the former financial administrator for CUF, and Vanessa Lopez Cuevas, who is our acting financial administrator for CUF. And then we also have Felicia Hyatt from OMB, and then Seth Adams, director of facilities management for Montgomery County Public Schools. So thank you all for being here. Ms. Bell Pearson.
Thank you, Chairman Rice. I would just like to take a couple of minutes to thank the council for the appropriation of the $500,000, which was a game changer for a lot of groups. We talk about equity and we talk about access. We were able to give access and equity to groups that had not in the past had access, for example, to turf fields. We were able to develop a Forge with Parks to create a funding source that would give access to those fields and give those groups that in the past had not been able to have that access the opportunity. So we are very grateful. We've forged partnerships with vendors now that we didn't have before. We definitely have them on our radar, and as the year moves on and into the next fiscal year, they're going to stay with us because we're definitely going to reach out to them. I also wanted to say a thank you, now that you've given me the opportunity, to my staff. They have done an excellent job. We have had people move on because new opportunities came about. We've had people who have been promoted from within and they've risen to the level. It's just been a very extensive learning experience for us, and I just want to make sure that that's on the record. And finally, I'll say, as to partnerships, all of the county agencies have been very supportive of CUF. I want to talk extra county and talk about MCPS. In particular, Seth and his group were very supportive of us and have worked with us closely. They did grant a forgiveness for last year's reimbursements. We have pending with them a forgiveness for this year's reimbursements, which is still on the table. So we're waiting to see what happens with that. But I do want to say that they've been a very invaluable partner with us, and we treasure that.
Well, one of the things I know, and thank you, Ms. Bell Pearson, is that the collaboration and partnerships between so many entities within county government has only grown over the years that I've been in service here. And I've certainly seen it. And it is tremendous because who benefits most is our constituents when we do that. And so I really want to thank all of you for your great work in making that happen. And again, making sure that more of these amenities are available to more constituents in our community, which makes our community a better place to live, which is what we all want for everyone. So thank you. With that, I'm going to turn to Ms. Yao to walk us through the packet.
Good morning. For the community use of public facilities, the executive in fiscal year 23 is recommending total expenditures of $10,923,236. It's an increase of about $2.5 million or 28% from the fiscal year 22 approved budget. The executive is recommending 30 positions and 30.27 FTEs, and that's a reduction of one full-time term position and one FTE. The adjustments recommended in the executive's budget are listed in the first table on page 2 of your packet. And council staff has identified 5 specific items for the committee to discuss this morning. The first one is MCPS reimbursements and the MOU between MCPS and the county. CUP is mandated to reimburse MCPS for costs incurred and services rendered in making facilities available to the community. For fiscal year 21, MCPS waived the amount due because of COVID school closures and that impact on revenues for the department. There's a request to waive reimbursements for fiscal year 22 that is pending. The table at the bottom of page 2 shows the reimbursements that CUF owes to MCPS in fiscal year 22 and what's projected for fiscal year 23. And for fiscal year 23, it makes up 63% of CUF's recommended expenditures. There's another impediment to making these reimbursement payments to MCPS, and that's the lack of a current Memorandum of Understanding. The last one expired, the last one of 2018 has expired, and this was actually an issue that the committee discussed last budget. So we may want to understand the reasons for the delay and when the agreement will be finalized.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Yao. And before I even turn to Ms. Bell-Pearson, I want to go back to my opening comments because I do think that with the OLO report that's looming out there in terms of recommendations of changes, I'm not sure if we want to move forward with an MOU solidifying things that may be recommended to change, and the council may say these are things that we'd like to see done differently as a result. So just wanted to get an idea as to where we are in the process of MOU and if that is the same take that CUP has, MCPS has, and if so, that's perfectly fine. I'm okay with that, but just wanted to make sure that that was the thinking, and if not, then the question does beg, then why the delay? So Ms. Bell-Pearson.
Thank you for raising that issue. That's kind of been what's been going on as we've tried to negotiate throughout the pandemic. We have issues arise such as security, and how will that be addressed? We've had issues arise as to staff cost, timing, schedules, et cetera, where the money would go, whether it would go to a school or go to facilities management, and I'll let Mr. Adams speak to that. But we have not been able to stop it being a moving target so that we could get final on that. Now that we have the OLO report, I don't know what council is going to support and recommend as far as how CUF will be should be structured, how we should spend our monies, how we should do our fees, because we also have a fee study looming out there. So there are a lot of unknowns. So I guess that's the best I can do in responding.
That's a great answer. Mr. Adams.
No, I would certainly echo Ms. Bell-Pearson's response here. I think we've had great collaboration over this time, particularly as we've navigated COVID and obviously some of the other financial challenges. But there have been nuances to the older approach to some of the new visioning that even we have beyond the OLO report. So I think some of that has really been part of our discussions, and not that we're trying to make everything perfect, because things do evolve and things do come up that sometimes create challenges. We do want to make sure that it is setting us up for the future, and not one that we have to revisit every year as things evolve. So.
Yeah, so I hate to punt to one of my colleagues that I think will return, but Councilmember Jawando, this is certainly one in which I think that we will try and address this, and so I'd like to come back to this maybe this summer and have us revisit after we've made some of the decisions. That's one of the next ones that's coming up regarding OLO recommendations, but then to really understand. So I'm hearing from the two of you that it would probably behoove us to make sure that we continue to wait on formalizing this MOU until we see exactly what we've identified as the structure of how CUP is going to move forward, as well as identifying some of those sticking points that still remain as points of contention when it comes to who's responsible, what the pay schedule is, all those kinds of things that can all be incorporated in that discussion. Ms. Yao.
My concern is, that there have been use that's accrued as well as revenues that haven't transferred. So, and this process of trying to decide what's going to happen with CUP will take some time. Again, particularly after a comprehensive study is done. So I don't know if there's a way to put in place an MOU for fiscal year 22 and 23, and then, we can figure out where things are going after that. It would allow at least business as usual to move forward.
So are you guys operating under the auspices of the previous MOU currently, or is it just kind of doing whatever?
I would say it's under the auspices because we are holding funds that would otherwise be required reimbursements under the former MOU. We have held them because finance has told us, without a legal document to formalize the relationship, we don't have a basis to transfer the funds. However, and because of the financial impact on us, we had asked for the waiver or for the forgiveness. But technically, we're holding things based on the former MOU. Is that a fair characterization, Patty?
Yes, that's the only way we have to calculate it right now. And there are actually some reimbursements that don't fall within the MOU, but resulted from a resolution of the ICB.
So, and I see Blaze in the audience as well, and I don't want to circumvent Ms. Hyatt, but as far as finance goes, is there a discussion around allowing for CUF to pay MCPS?
Definitely not to my knowledge. There has been any additional discussions related to changing that opinion from a finance perspective.
So, yes, Patty. Yeah.
So the issue for the Department of Finance is that we don't have the MOU in place.
Understood.
How they would feel about us accruing these things based on an agreement that isn't valid at the current time is a separate question. We did recently have a conversation with the executive branch about using a decision memo from the executive or the CAO to the Department of Finance that could allow us to make the payments for the current year. It would be at the, at the rates under the old MOU.
Exactly. And I think that would, and I see Mr. nodding his head, that would at least be reasonable in the sense of at least getting something. So maybe working on budget language that would be able to dictate that we'd like to see that move forward with having finance to distribute those or not finance, but budget language directing finance to distribute the funds from CUF to MCPS under the previous agreement. So if we can have that at least shores up MCPS for the current time frame and still doesn't then put pressure on us when it comes to launching into an MOU that really isn't ready for prime time yet. So I think that seems to be, I see a lot of nodding heads. I like when I see nodding heads. So that seems to be, but let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Juando.
Thank you. Good morning. So is the waiver going to happen? There's a lot going on here. And I think I would feel more comfortable if we just, there's a new council that's going to come in. We're going to have 6 new people or ish. There will be, you have these studies hanging out there. I think it's highly unlikely that we make some major reform to CUF this year. So to Ms. Yale's point, there's going to be, it's probably going to take a couple of years to do this, or at least a year and a half. What's preventing us from just renewing the old MOU and just operating under that, or tweaking it slightly based on, if you do have some new information, so that we can just have that in place until we're ready to do the new structure?
And that is a great question. I think there are fundamental elements of what we're talking about that will continue, right? So there's staffing that's involved in this work. The staffing that supports the community users as they come into MCPS buildings. That will not change. Some of the elements that we've been talking about as part of an MOU that are maybe bigger scale are there additional supports? Are there additional measures that are in place in some of these buildings? So you're correct. There is a base level that theoretically will not change, when it comes to, any MOU or any negotiation elements. I think the next level, as you mentioned, is that sort of the enhancements. What comes out of OLO, what comes out of, even some of the elements that are not part of the OLO report that Ramona and her team have brought forward, and that we've worked together to figure out how to make that user experience better. Incorporating those pieces would be part of that next level. But there is that base piece that there does involve staffing that needs to open up buildings, that needs to support, that needs to clean. That would not change, which we could. I think from Councilmember Rice's perspective, that's sort of the piece that would move forward to allow those individuals that money to be transferred to pay those individuals. But that's sort of that next level finalization of a MOU that crafts out 2020 type of services for our communities is what we're talking about, waiting to firm up.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, I think again, documents can be changed over time. If the hang up, I do remember, it's deja vu. I do remember talking about this last year. If the hang up is finance, if it's the decision memo, or if it's a bare bones MOU that just outlines those points, I don't really have a strong opinion about that, but I do think we need to get the funds. We need to have a mechanism to transfer the funds, and we can't wait until there's a new MLU to do that. It sounds like everyone agrees on that. So, I'm fine with the budget language. I just, I just really hope that we can do that soon, because I think that needs to be, at least, we don't want to have that hang up. So do you have a sense of, from the administration side, I know you're fairly new and probably haven't done a ton on this, but maybe you guys can get back to us on the timeline it would take to get that going as far as a decision memo or just the bare bones MOU. Again, I don't have a strong preference,
At this point, we haven't had discussions with the executive about a decision memo. We were meeting with the county attorney, and the county attorney told us maybe 2-3 weeks ago that this might be an option. He also indicated that he needed to do some additional research to make sure that that would fit the issue. We also have not, until probably this morning, talked with MCPS or with Seth about the possibility of doing a temporary, maybe 1-year MOU that would just tweak a little and expand our relationship until we can get a more formal, longer-term document. But that is something that it sounds like we're willing to work on.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds great. That would be my preference if you guys could figure it out. I mean, in the enhancements that you mentioned, that can always be, or it could be some sort of hybrid. You just have a document that's the baseline, and then there's some decision memo that allows for these enhancements in the short term. But I leave it to you to come back to us. But I think there should be a way to figure this out. So appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councilmember Joanna, one of the things, I hate to throw wrenches into the process, but keep in mind we also have the ECEI that is brand new that talks about childcare, and Kerwin Blueprint that talks about childcare, that is squarely right in the crosshairs of what happens with this. And we'll be discussing that in a moment too. I know that's one of the things we're talking about bid process when it comes to childcare placement. So there's a lot that's encompassed in these future decisions. And so I just want to caution us about rushing too quickly when we have these kinds of things that are looming out there that are very big, that have us directly attached to state law and requirements in terms of what we're going to provide, and then how strategically we make that happen. And we have this new entity with ECEI that's out there as well, the Early Care Education Initiative that the county, and we in Education and Culture supported, that's going to be looking at public-private partnerships and how best to leverage those to provide childcare, which means then spaces primarily in Montgomery County Public Schools and other public buildings. And so from that standpoint, there's a lot that I think should be incorporated into this next MOU that highlights those priorities. And so from that standpoint, while I agree with you that it needs to happen sooner rather than later, that's why I'm saying over the summer, we can start to have those discussions as we have the rollout of Blueprint that is in its first year of iteration, full Blueprint, to where we can start to see what some of those nuanced changes will be. So I do think that it's important for us to come back this summer to talk about that and see if we can set something up before the year. But in the meantime, I think having this budget language is the best way to move forward, because in the process of budget, there's way too many decision points out there that we're not ready to make right now. So.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that. I think even outside of the budget language is fine. I just want to know, you guys move forward, try to figure something out, interim, medium, long term. And I think we're open to what those things are, but just that we got to, we have to do it. So, but I totally agree. There's a lot here. Thanks for passing it on to the next council. I appreciate that.
We love you. It's a gift that keeps on giving. All right. So Ms. Young, we'll go ahead to, we've already started to talk about it a little bit, but
Sure.
We can go ahead to number 2 with budget implications.
So the Office of Legislative Oversight recently released their Community Use of Public Facilities report on April 26th. Mr. DeFazio is in the audience, and in case the committee has any questions. The report responded to Council's request to understand the functions of CUF and to examine CUFs in other jurisdictions before and after school child care selection processes. There are a couple recommendations that Council staff wanted to raise that have implications on CUF's fiscal year 23 operating budget for the committee's consideration. The first item is reclassifying the program specialist who handles CUF's outreach and communications and changing that to a community outreach manager or a communications manager to improve CUF's internal as well as external communications. The report concludes that there is a program specialist grade 18 who is dedicated to handling CUF's outreach and communication. It was filled, then vacant, and then lapsed. The report concludes that CUF desperately needs to address its internal external communications and lacks the proper position and grade to address the department's communication needs. So the report concludes that the council should approve the county executive's fiscal year 23 recommendation to restore the CUF's program specialist position, but add funding to reclassify the position to a community outreach manager. And the estimate that's provided in the report is $56,000. And also, if council does approve this addition, then the report recommends that the reclassification process start immediately.
Okay, so we have a council staff recommendation. Is there objection from colleagues? Hearing none. Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to add just to that point, when just kind of considering those two items, it would change the fund balance for fiscal year 23, I think, from 13.1% to about 11.9%, but it would still meet CUF's 10% target, but just wanted to share that percentage point change.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
can I ask whether Councilmember Navarro is still in the meeting?
Yes.
I am still in the meeting.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
I
she's
just want to
here.
make sure so I can get the vote.
Yep. Yep.
The screen dropped me, but I'm still here.
Okay,
There you go.
great. Okay. The second is to consider a comprehensive study that goes beyond the proposed RFP study from 2019. The Community Use of Public Facilities has been planning to do a fee study for some time now, but then the pandemic hit. And the recommendation is that the report... That's okay. That the report provide additional, basically, information in terms of how the office functions. There is, I guess, a proposal out there to have a couple of council fellows do some of this work ahead of time. But in order to, council staff concurs with the OLO recommendation. There's not an exact cost known about what a study would cost at this point, but council staff does recommend reserving some capacity in the department's budget to ensure that they can move forward with a more comprehensive study if needed.
So I concur with that, but did certainly want to hear from Ms. Bell Pearson, give you an opportunity, your thoughts on this and whether or not you support the efforts to be able to move forward in this direction.
We do.
Okay.
We have already reserved funds, and I was just touching base with Ms.
Even
Vitale. There was $200,000, I believe, reserved from back 2019. We kept holding that. We did make an attempt that was right before the pandemic started, and we did not get enough people to respond to the RFP. So we're hopeful that as things have reopened, coupled with the use of the summer fellows, we'll be able to have data for them to start with and move forward.
Excellent. So, Ms. Yao, if that's already encumbered, then we might be able to utilize from. It seems as though that's already encumbered funds.
I guess I wanted to clarify: is that amount then already? It's been programmed already, so it's not. It doesn't draw down from the fiscal year 23 budget. Okay. All right. Great.
So we're good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Great. So, yes, we support and concur. Colleagues, concur with the recommendation, and we don't have to do the placeholder, which is even better. So your fund balance stays where it is.
Yeah, I was just going to say that original percent, I assumed that.
I got
so
you.
thank you.
I heard you. See? I'm listening. See, I'm paying attention. There it is. All right, Ms. Yao, next one.
Okay. So actually, now we're going to be talking about the CUF fund balance and the drawdown of it. The OLO report provides some really important historical information about the fund balance. The CUF has a policy to maintain a 10% threshold of reserves to ensure that, it mitigates against current and future risks, et cetera. CUF hadn't had a balance above that significantly until its third year of operating the Silver Springs Civic Building. So by fiscal year 17, there was a significant fund balance over the 10% threshold. And so the ICB began implementing a five-year plan to support funding additional items that positively affect community use, to draw down the excess funds until it reached, again, the target reserve level. The different items that were funded included installation of cameras and furniture and things like that for the Silver Springs Civic Building, as well as other places in the county, 32 other county locations, fee assistance for facility use, school ball field renovation and maintenance, and also audio and visual. I think I just said that. So the drawdown of the fund balance stopped in 2021, I guess. I think in 21, due to the COVID pandemic, because revenues were not coming in and the fund balance dropped precipitously. So there is the end of the year fund balance for fiscal year 23 is approximately 1.9 million, and it's 13.1% of total, projected for 23 would be 13.1% of total reserves, and then actually a smaller amount that Ms. Hyatt had mentioned if we add additional funding. Community use is projected to return to pre-pandemic levels in fiscal year 23. So there is funding moving forward in terms of the ball field support from the CUF Enterprise Fund. The Parks Ball Field Initiative CIP project shows funding of $300,000 coming from CUF for each of the 6 years during the CIP period. The fiscal plan for CUF shows that the balance will fall below the 10% target in fiscal year 24. County executive has included funding in his budget for fiscal year 23 at $300,000 using enterprise funds, and Councilmember Reamer had just sent a memo requesting that funding remain there. And the ICB met recently, this past week, I believe, and they support the use of the $300,000 for fiscal year 23, as well as, I guess, an additional amount in bonds for school ball field renovation that was discussed at council. So they support those items. However, they do not support any additional amount for school ball field renovation coming from the enterprise fund for fiscal year 23, and actually after that for the 24 through fiscal year 28. And actually that would be council staff's recommendation as well, as to approve the $300,000 for 23, because there's showing capacity for 23, but not to program the enterprise funds for the rest of the years in the capital budget. If there are funds that, are carrying over the 10% target, then council can make those decisions at that time.
Yeah, so let me just say that I agree with you in the sense of keeping and retaining. It's very important. I talked to Mr. Riley with Parks, and the FY23 money is incredibly important to make sure that we have that there. Again, I hate to seem like we're kicking the can down the road. I don't think so, because each and every year we're making decisions on what we need to do regarding ball fields and ball field initiatives. We've had supplementals, we've had all kinds of things. We've had additional budget money that's come in, so we make that decision every year. So from that standpoint, I'm supportive of council staff's recommendation of retaining the $300,000 for FY23, but let me turn to my colleagues and see where they are. Councilmember Jawando?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I mean, with I would like to hear if there's any additional comments from the team here on this. You know.
Well, I think it was a fair characterization that Ms. Yao stated from the board meeting, which was on Tuesday of this week.
Okay.
There was a lot of discussion. There was a presentation by Casey Anderson and Mike Riley related to fields. There were questions raised by Mr. Adams, which I think I'll let him address, that caused the board to have pause with regard to supporting any more than $300,000 as represented in the executive's budget for this FY23. In addition to the history that was discussed, it was very specifically articulated that when this was legislated as a means of, and by this I mean the Ball Fields Initiative, as a means of drawing down the CUF fund budget, it was intended to be from FY17 to FY22. Now, there was a pause during the pandemic with regard to the CUF being able to make contributions, and that those years, I believe, for 2 years it went from the GEO bonds as opposed.
So is there enough money to finish the project? I mean, these fields need, that's kind of the question I need to understand.
Well, as it was legislated, these 21 fields they're talking about weren't the fields that was intended. We've already addressed those fields. In fact,
Okay.
we've been asking for a schedule and for an accounting for some time now and have not received it to actually understand which fields are in what position, because we
Right.
also had an equity lens we were requiring.
Right.
That we wanted to make sure that fields that were in focus communities were addressed just as equally as fields that are in down county, for example. So that's something we're still trying to work with Parks on, because we haven't actually gotten specific information, and I believe Mr. Adams can address that too.
Sure, and what we're talking about are MCPS fields. Obviously, we're very supportive of this work. However, as discussed at the ICB board meeting, just a discussion of really understanding it from a full context of a county perspective. Understanding what work would happen. What fields are the highest priority. Which fields could move the needle from an equity perspective are really elements that I think would help when thinking about additional funds. But also talking about the fund balance transfer, certainly has to acknowledge that there is still over $2 million that is being asked to be forgiven from an MCPS perspective. So I think when we're talking about distributing $300,000 from this same account that we're also being asked to forgive $2.2 million, I think it sometimes makes for difficult decisions,
Yeah.
difficult discussions.
Well, I mean, the ball fields have been a priority for many of us, and for me, and all of us have seen these fields, and particularly the cycle of MCPS fields that were done 20 years ago. They're in really poor repair, to your point of the equity lens. We've had this conversation in Fed with Director Riley and stuff. I almost feel like I needed to be at the ICB to mediate, so I can, hear. Well, that's why Ms. Yao was there. But I support the council staff recommendation. But my sense from Parks and the conversations I've had is that they do have some sort of list. Maybe they're not sharing it with you, but my sense is they do have an equity focused kind of timeline list. So we need to get that out in the get that some air, so to speak. Pun intended. So go ahead, Mr. Adams. Or Ms. Yao, maybe, and then Mr.
I was going to say, it would certainly be helpful to improve the communications between the different agencies. I just want to clarify that how we fund the ball field renovation is separate from whether we should fund it through the enterprise fund.
Sure.
And then that's the thing. I think it is a priority, and the council has definitely spoken about that. And I think that if there's funding in the enterprise fund, that can support other, priorities, and it's above the target 10% reserve, that's fine. And if there's not, then we should find other sources of funding to support that high priority.
Yeah. Okay. Did you want to comment?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No,
Go
okay.
ahead, Sam.
Well, just one more element that I wanted to add was that similar to the partnerships between MCPS and HHS, we did talk about at the ICB board opportunities for partnerships, greater partnerships between MCPS and Parks. We have within our CIP different different functions to focus on different different fields, play spaces. I think if there is a sort of step back and a greater understanding of a county-wide focus,
Yeah.
I think you can start to draw additional resources together to really focus and
Figure
move
out
the needle on this.
how to do it. All right. Well, yes, I agree. That's what we need to do. So,
So let's do this. When we come back to discuss CUP in general, we'll discuss this part of it as well. And that's why I think, again, it's smart for us to just do the $300,000 for this year
Agreed.
and then figure out how we're going to be going moving forward when it comes to where we're going to get this money from, how it's going to be structured, all of that. So,
And
Councilmember Navarro, any objection to the staff recommendation?
I don't have any objection. I am going to support the staff recommendation. I also think that it would be important to keep a list of all these very important issues. It's very difficult during budget time to have in-depth examination of all these very, complex issues. And so I would, I just want to sort of share that traditionally during budget time is not when we get into a lot of these in-depth and complex moving parts, because they require a lot more analysis. And I know our central office staff and everybody is so worn out. But no doubt, I think it will be important to keep a list and then come back to a session after budget to then position us. So position the next council. So when the budget time comes, that information will already be there and will have been utilized in order to position things in a best light. So giving all of that, I think that our staff recommendation, Ms. Yao's recommendation, is what I would like to support.
Excellent. All right. So without objection, we'll move forward with that, and we'll go ahead to fee assistance programs. Ms. Yao.
Terrific. For fiscal year 23, the county executive is recommending funding for the 2 fee assistance programs at pre-pandemic levels. So for the Silver Spring the Silver Spring building, the community access program, the recommendation is $150,000 that's going to be coming from the CUP Enterprise Fund. From the facility fee assistance program, there's going to be $50,000 coming from the CUP Enterprise Fund and $25,000 coming from the general fund. Council staff provides a bit of background in terms of funding that the council approved in CARES funding, and Director Bell Pearson had mentioned that in a previous discussion. But the council had approved $500,000 in federal CARES funding to support field and building use for youth sports programs, and all those funds were fully utilized by December 31st of this past December 31st, so through half of fiscal year 23. The council has indicated that it will support an additional $125,000 in ARPA funding to support these efforts, and any amounts that are not spent out in 22 will roll over to 23, so that there will be that additional amount. And as a result, council staff recommends approving the proposed funding for fee assistance programs in the 23 operating budget.
Excellent. Any objection from my colleagues? Hearing none? Okay. And Ms. Yao, sorry. Before we get to the next one, let me just say that we talked a little bit about this already before in our previous conversation around the bid process for child care placement. I do agree with Councilmember Navarro and Councilmember Jonah. We've all been on the same page here that we want to bring that back when we have that larger discussion around OLO report, Kerwin blueprint, fee schedule, all those kinds of things, MOU, as a collective to understand better where we are. But certainly agree with you that with the pilot bid done, and we certainly want to make sure that things move forward. But bless you, if we can get to a point where we can get some things solidified this summer, that would be terrific, so that we have something set for the new year. It will be imperative for us to have something based on ECEI and Kerwin blueprint. So from that perspective, more to come from that. Okay. Colleagues, anything else? All right.
Just Ms.
Councilmember
Bill
Twatter,
Pearson on
please.
the fee assistance. I appreciated you bringing that up, that it was really important. So this will hopefully continue some of that work as we figure it out. But any comment on the scale and scope of this and how you see this going into the future? I just briefly. I just want.
Yes, what we've tried to do is, and I'm sure you've heard presentations related to the out-of-school time
Yeah.
group studies. We have tried to incorporate some of the lessons learned from the additional funding we had and the experiences we had with new vendors and different parts of our community that we hadn't reached before. We're trying to roll that into the out-of-school time. We're working very closely with MCPS and the Office of School-Wide Districts, and they're being very supportive. They have a lot of resources. They're helping us tune in further into the community. So we are trying to continue the momentum that way. And that's aligning with we're trying to align that with the executive's early child care initiative also, so that we'll be in sync for all of that. The mapping that's been done to understand where the child care deserts are, as well as out-of-school resources and supports there. We're trying to incorporate all of that. In fact, there was an earlier presentation, I believe, made to Fed maybe this week related to, or maybe it was the Joint Committee, related to how we are going to be working with the Foundation for Youth Activities. I'm sorry, I can't remember their full name, but it's a foundation that we're entering a contract with to get some brainstorming done to see what's being done nationwide so that we can incorporate some of those resources into our out-of-school time planning.
Good. That's critical. I'm glad to hear that. More to come. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate, again, the continued partnership and working together, and we look forward to following up sometime this summer. So thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, our last one, which is our work session on Montgomery County Public Schools, both operating budget and FY23 through 28 capital improvement program. As my partners come up to the dais, we've got Jimmy DeAndrea, Chief of Staff with Montgomery County Public Schools, Stephanie Sharon, Chief of Strategic Initiatives with MCPS, Dr. Kara Trinkamp, Director of Technology, Innovation, and Support, Rob Riley, Associate Superintendent, Office of Finance, Thomas Klausing, Executive Director of Finance, Yvonne Alfonso Windsor, Supervisor of the Budget Unit, and Rich Harris from our Office of Management and Budget, as well as Veronica Jawa from OMB as well. So welcome to everyone. And of course, we have our great staff, Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez and Ms. McGuire. I'm just going to start off by saying this. When we first had our original conversation with Dr. Wolf, Ms. Wolf and Dr. McKnight, we lamented about the fact that we didn't think that we would be able to get to the full amount of the Board of Education's request. We also recognized that this was a significant increase. And so while we knew that we most likely would not get to that actual number, we were hoping that we would get closer. From what I've seen in terms of tracking some of the items that have gone through various committees, the only committee that has actually contributed significant funds to help address the deficits on our reconciliation list is the Education and Culture Committee.
I'm sorry, GEO has also contributed something.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
The OPEB, the $20 million that we did not accept.
That's
so,
right. That is very true. So thank you, Councilmember Navarro. That's true. That's fair. That's fair. But when we look at it, there's not a lot based on what it is that we have to be able to work with. Understanding that there are so many needs that are across the various departments, it really does create a challenge for us when it comes to trying to get closer to that number that we know could be equitably spent to help to achieve some of the things that we want to do within our schools. It is our hope that the continued funding via the state, via Kerwin, the continued attention from the federal government and understanding that education is a priority, and my hope that that continues, whether it's no longer Esser funding or ARPA funding, but other recognitions of the work that still needs to be done that we've realized via COVID, I think will help us to get there. And so with that, I do want to turn it over to my colleagues for any comments they may have before we jump in briefly, and then we'll turn right to staff to get us started in terms of some decision points. So I'll start with Councilmember Navarro, followed by Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do not have any additional comments. I think you framed it very well. I do believe that overall, of course, who doesn't always want to do more? But I do think that given where we are right now, with a lot of one-time revenues, with still concerns and challenges in the community, overall, I think this budget recommendation does achieve quite a bit to support our students, our faculty, our families. And so I definitely do support your framing of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Councilmember Duando.
Yeah, not a lot to add. I'll be interested to hear from MCPS team, as we get into the conversation, and I'll have questions, but no, not a ton to add at this point. I appreciate the framing. I talked at the outset about my view of the budget process when we first had it presented to us, and I do appreciate that ENC and GO have found some savings. So I want to get into the discussion. So I appreciate it.
All right, so we'll turn to Ms. McGuire and Mr. DeAndre. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
If I can just mention briefly, thank you, Chairman Rice. Just on behalf of the school system, I do want to thank you and all the members of the Education and Culture Committee for all of your work to support the efforts of trying to narrow that gap. We know that as we come out of this pandemic, hopefully, we're at a unique time in the history of education, and this budget has been crafted in a way to best meet the needs of students and best support staff to meet the needs of students. And so we know that every piece of it's incredibly important. We also recognize the fiscal constraints. So, on behalf of Ms. Wolf, Dr. McKnight, we are very grateful for everything that each of you is doing.
Well, thank you, Mr. DeAndre. That makes it a little bit easier. But so thank you. Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez.
Thank you, council members. We're here today with our partners from MCPS and the Office of Management and Budget. The packet includes two sections, the first being on the operating budget and then the second on a CIP project that we'll discuss after the committee makes their recommendations on the operating piece. As you noted, on April 20th, the committee met and had an in-depth discussion and overview on the MCPS requested FY23 operating budget and the county executive's recommendation. The packet provides a small summary of that conversation and of the previous staff report, and additional information is included on compensation and benefits and a few technical amendments, as well as public testimony. For public testimony, I'll just note that around 16 individuals testified, with the majority of them supporting and advocating for full funding of the budget. And they also mentioned priority issues on mental health, wellness centers, later school start times, school safety, special education supports, and racial equity. Council staff recommends the following appropriation: a total of $2,910,027,627 for the total appropriation for MCPS, which is an increase of $129 million from the approved FY22. In addition, for the tax-supported appropriation, it is a total of $2.7 billion, which includes a county contribution of $1.84 million and the $25 million reappropriation of fund balance. The county contribution increase is $86.4 million over the FY22 approved. And now we can turn to questions, and I'll just note as well the compensation and benefits portion was discussed with GO on April 21st and also with the full council on April 26th, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Let me turn to Councilmember Duando. Okay. All right. Let me just say this. Again, sizable increase, not exactly what we were hoping, but certainly gets us closer to what it is that we know is going to continue to help our kids to be able to have the equitable access to education that we know is so important. And so without objection from my colleagues, we're okay. Mr. Rodriguez-Hernandez, next.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to, any other further comments from MCPS? Then we will switch to our technology modernization project discussion. All right, so we'll start with this, and council staff will note that there have been a revised additions, made corrections to the staff report this morning. That should be uploaded online soon. And the committee members should have a copy, as well as our MCPS and OMB partners. So the technology modernization project is discussed during the operating budget conversations due to the funding sources being current revenue and recordation tax. The MCPS has requested an FY23 to 28 6-year total that it reflects an increase of 8.14% from the amended FY21 to 26 CIP. The county executive submitted an affordability reconciliation PDF that provided some reductions in current revenue for this project. And you will see that essentially the county executive's recommendation brings the FY23 to 26 levels back to the amended FY21 to 26 levels, and slightly reduced the 27 to 28. So for fiscal year 23, we're seeing a $100,000 reduction that the executive recommended, and for fiscal year 24, a $300,000 reduction that is recommended. The majority of the reduction is through fiscal years 25 through 28, and council staff recommends reviewing these later year impacts in the next full CIP cycle, or in the next CIP discussion, as they are later in the 6-year period. Council staff notes that Esser funding and other existing resources are available and eligible for the technology needs, which may be able to meet the $400,000 reduction for fiscal year 23 and 24. In addition, there was a technical adjustment on funding sources that will be reflected in the PDF for the council's review during the budget work sessions in May. But MCPS and council staff concur with the funding source technical adjustment.
Okay, so we have an agreement on the funding source technical adjustment, but Mr. DeAndrea, let me turn to you and staff regarding the reduction in tech mod that the county executive has recommended.
Dr. Trinkamp's going to start us off here.
Hi. Is it afternoon? No, not yet. Still good morning. Hi. We do agree. We appreciate very much the partnership, ongoing, long-standing partnership that we have around helping to fund technology in Montgomery County Public Schools, because we know that makes us stronger. So we know that we will create efficiencies to ensure that we can offset the recommendation that just came in over the next 2 years. And then we do agree to take a closer look over the next year as we come back, each year for this to look at the out years. There may be some concern with the out years, whether enrollment increases, make some modifications to those, or just cost to technology. So we do agree to come back and revisit those, but we really do appreciate the partnership.
Okay. I'll just say this, and then I'll turn to my colleagues, but I'm always concerned when I hear efficiencies. Again, efficiencies are good, but sometimes, depending, people have access to things that they don't any longer, and so while it's viewed as an efficiency, it's still, to some, viewed as a reduction in service. And so from that standpoint, I just remain cautious. But let me turn to my colleagues. I want to turn to Councilmember Joando and then Councilmember Navarro.
You were so efficient in the past item, I didn't realize I should have asked some questions then, but I still have the people in the room. Not going to change the outcome of the vote, and I raised when we had the more in-depth conversation about the Esser funding, for example, I asked about the chart and where's everything going, and Dr. McKnight responded, as did the other team. I think that was virtual. I can't remember. I think that was virtual. Yeah, okay. Last week, I guess, or the week before. So I know we had that discussion, and I appreciate your very eloquent point that every bit helps, Mr. DeAndrea. And so I guess connected to this point, have we, since that last conversation a couple weeks ago, have you refined or have any more information about the use of the Esser funds and particularly as it relates to technology, for example, but even other things was going to be my question for the previous questions. Not going to change the outcome, but I just think we need to understand in an ongoing way those priorities and what that's going to be so that we can work with you over the course of the year and heading into next year to just have that full context.
So I can address some of the initial items around the technology in Esser. So as you know, when we were pivoting in the pandemic and we first were getting relief funds, our first priority was to make sure that connectivity for all of our students at home was happening quickly, and also to make sure that there was connectivity happening for our staff that were not only supporting students, but also supporting essential services as well. So that a large amount of our monies, particularly when we think about the first Esser funds, the Esser 1 funds, were around lifting that up. We were able, between that as well as the tech mod budget and the relationship we've had with the council over many years, and the generosity that we have received as far as our tech mod budget, we're able to, and this is a very unusual number when we were looking nationwide, to get 99.6% of our families connected almost immediately at home. And that was also dealing with huge barriers for some of our families around accessing technology, internet, hotspots. So when we started coming back from the pandemic, when we started looking at the allocation of our Esser funds, we realized that we actually, in essence, needed to support two environments. We needed to continue to support the home environment for students because we have now created a situation where we are so reliant on our technology to be enhancing the teaching and learning in an equitable manner for all of our students. But then when we came back, we also had to continue to take a look at our classroom environment to ensure that in the classrooms, we are making sure that we're maximizing the technology use for our staff so that they're being able to really deliver the highest quality education possible. So when you think about the Esser funds more specifically, our Esser budget has really funded, we're using a large amount of money for interactive panels. Some of you may be familiar with the Promethean boards. Promethean board technology is extremely outdated. They're not even really making Promethean boards much anymore. We can get the parts, we can repair, but what we're moving towards are these interactive panels, which are more mobile for staff and schools. And as a result, they're really creating a more wireless and interactive approach to the teaching and learning environment for our students. We also have that situation where, although we have a one-on-one Chromebook situation for our students at home, which we are continuing to maintain, I
charge several of them every night.
I'm sure. We also are continuing to take a look at the fact that what we've realized is that we have been utilizing some of our Esser money as well in purchasing additional Chromebooks for the school environment. We realize that students that, for instance, one example of that is look at our K through 2 students. Transferring a Chromebook from home to school for our K through 2 is not ideal. We know that. And the reality is that a lot of their learning is also hands-on in the classroom. They're not just relying solely on Chromebooks as a technology tool. It's also heavy for the little guys to be able to be carrying that back and forth. So that's one area where we're looking at creating a situation where they can keep their Chromebook technology use at home, but then we're using some of our Esser funds to purchase that for the schools so they have classroom sets so the students are able to utilize that technology there. We also are continuing to fund the Hotspot initiative, which was hugely successful for our families during the pandemic. So we're continuing to use Esser funds to purchase our hotspots so the families that do not have connectivity at home can utilize that. And then you also have a lot of the digital technology tools that we started using in the pandemic that, even though we're back in person, have actually created a huge amount of equity within our system. Zoom is a prime example of that we are continuing to use Esser funds for, to make sure that we have a robust infrastructure that now has created opportunities for families and parents to engage more holistically with the school environment that they weren't able to do before. We had a lot of barriers for families and community members for being able to come into school, back to school nights or parent conferences or different events where they could engage with PTAs. Utilizing some of these online platforms have created an environment where families can connect with schools, not exclusively virtually, but more so in an opportunity to really make sure that homeschool environment we're really talking to each other. So that's how we've been using a lot of our Esser money as we continue to merge and manage the new environment that we're in. We know that over the years, though, now that we have this huge influx of money that we have with Esser, it's going to go away. So now what we're going to have to do is really be strategic in how we are braiding the tech mod budget to sustain this technology and these equitable resources for our community long term. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Trenkamp. But did I forget anything, Dr. Trenkamp, do you want to add to?
I think you covered most of that. Yeah, just to put a couple numbers with that. Right now, we have more than 13,000 hotspots out in our community, and we are positioned to continue to support those and add more as needed. We have turned no families away, and actually have actively engaged in our parent community coordinators and our PPWs, and partnered with our community organizations on ensuring that families have what they need to connect beyond the school day. We have more than 180,000 Chromebooks out in the community for home use. As Ms. Sharon said, those are going back and forth to school. So we are seeing a little bit more wear and tear on that. So our repair numbers are a little higher than what we've seen traditionally. So we're looking at, we've put cases on those. We've looked at classroom sets for our littlest learners in particular, so that they not only don't need to worry about the responsibility of carrying something back and forth, but also just even the weight of it, in their backpack. We've heard from our families. So really looking at how we use our different funding sources to really support two environments: our classroom environment, making sure it has what it needs, but also ensuring that our families that have become accustomed to having these technologies at home and readily available, that they continue to have those. So we're really looking at how we stand up and support two very robust environments through the use of technology.
I appreciate that. A very robust answer. And like I said, I have a second grader who sees a lot of wear and tear, so I know exactly what you're talking about with her Chromebook. And I appreciate your point about long term. This is going to be something we're going to have to monitor in the future years' budgets, and so important because we can't go back from some of these things that are happening and helping students and families. So it sounds like for now the $400,000 can be absorbed. The council staff will be okay for now, so that's fine. But I'll be eager to hear as we go forward how we're going to pull these things together after Esser money is gone. So appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Jondo. Let me turn to Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also going back to the previous item, I did have some questions about the two-way immersion program. No doubt, this has been a very important particular approach, a real model, a best practice that I've been very interested in and have been advocating for many years, not only because both my daughters participated, they went through the Spanish immersion program, the total Spanish immersion program at Rock Creek Forest, and now as young professionals, I see how being bilingual has absolutely opened so many doors for them in their professional careers. But also thinking about the role that, language as an asset, language acquisition as an asset, how important that is for our students. And as we see the growth, especially in our ESOL population, and I think the data point still stands that I believe 70% or so of our ESOL students are U.S. born, which obviously speaks to the need for quality early care and education. But once they enter the school system, the fact that then they're in ESOL does bring forth some other particular challenges for their academic success. And so this idea of two-way immersion program is just so powerful, right? Because then language acquisition becomes an asset. And instead of it being seen as a stigma or a deficit. And also it gives all students the opportunity to acquire a second language, which then they can leverage later in life if they want to, of course, in their professional endeavors. And so I always believe that this was a win-win. We know that we have huge waiting lists for the current immersion programs. And I did receive some correspondence from parents from Oakland Terrace, for example, who were a bit concerned about the focus school designation and the two-way immersion program, and just wondering what is the status right now and what are the plans moving forward to continue to expand the two-way immersion program, but then also in schools like Oakland Terrace that somehow lost that focus school designation. And they felt that those resources are still needed very much so. And they did express to me that there was not a lot of communication. They were a bit surprised how this happened. So I just wanted to hear very, briefly, if you can, where are you taking this particular program? What about issues of evaluation that are so important so that one can tweak how to continue to do this? And yeah, just in general, just expressing how every single time I'm out in the community, this comes up as a really important and very critical issue. And so I'm hoping that the school system will continue to prioritize this best practice in our schools. So just a question about, where are we with the expansion? What is the evaluation component that is required? And then finally, the focus school designation.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Navarro. And this is such an important topic. We actually just had a conversation in a recent Board of Education meeting regarding immersion programs, and specifically the two-way immersion programs. And we recognize the importance of, when we provide these opportunities for our youngest learners, it has an impact on them for the rest of their lives. And so as a result of that, there is work that's ongoing now to evaluate the programs that we have, where they are located, and then be able to make recommendations about how we move forward from there, because we know there's tremendous interest in our community in these opportunities. In terms of Oakland Terrace, I will follow up on that and get more information about the specific communication that occurred, and then circle back with your office. Each year we evaluate the schools that are designated as focus schools and Title I schools based on primarily the percentage of students who qualify for free or reduced price meals. And so I will get more information about Oakland Terrace in particular, and then follow up with your office.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and if you can also provide additional details on how many two-way immersion, schools are there right now. I know there's some in the packet, there's information, but the evaluation component, and then what plans are there for future expansion. As I said, I think particularly, of course, in the Latino community, there's a lot of interest because folks would rather have their children in two-way immersion versus ESOL, but then also parents of children who are not Spanish native speakers, you really have a desire for bilingual skill sets. And I think, it is a win-win, and we should find a way to be a bit more intentional about the expansion, which has been a bit slow in my opinion, but really look forward to receiving that information.
Definitely. I just want to acknowledge also that this is a very important priority for Dr. McKnight, as she transitioned to be an interim superintendent this year, and obviously permanent superintendent effective July 1st. And that's one of the reasons that there is ongoing work to evaluate where we stand now and determine next steps moving forward. So thank you again for raising this, and we will definitely follow up with more detail.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I know that, in terms of the designation of focus schools, I know that there is a formula, but I also know that we have at times also been a bit flexible, because we need to take into consideration a bit more than just a hard, stop when it comes to issues that do affect our students. Sometimes it is, farms, sometimes it's mobility, sometimes it's the ESOL, rates as well. And so to the extent that you can take a look at Oakland Terrace and perhaps be a little more flexible if possible, that would be really important. No doubt that many of the conversations we've had since the pandemic started was this concern about the effects of the pandemic and destabilizing so many in our community, especially our families. And so I think that we may have to be a little bit more flexible as we continue to seek ways to stabilize our families in the community. So I would really appreciate some consideration to address that.
Absolutely. I will get more information about that. And I also want to acknowledge that what you just shared aligns with also some of the work that Dr. McKnight has charged the cabinet and shared with the Board of Education around looking at the way that we handle our staffing in general, and recognizing, as I said at the beginning, we're in a truly unique time in the history of American education, and really this gives us tremendous opportunity, but also it requires us to think differently about the way that we best support each of our schools to meet the needs of students in those schools. So thank you very much, Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that. One last thing I will say is that there are instances where when you have, immersion programs, there might be an issue with the children who are in the immersion program versus the regular program. And a lot of times the designation is done based on the entire school enrollment. And so there might be some particular attention, I think, that I know you've paid in the past. You've done that to make sure that you are, taking into consideration the fact that maybe the immersion students may have a higher farms rate and not average that with the rest of the school, to figure out how to do these designations. I understand it's not easy because it's not like an exact science, but more than ever, I think just because of what the pandemic has done, we should definitely try to figure out a way to be a bit more flexible and take into consideration the needs of the students and the families as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Councilmember Jumando.
One of the things I wanted to ask on the technology piece, the replacement cost, we've heard from some parents that has become a burden, and some, just like anything in our counties, the ones who can navigate and make a complaint, they can have dispensation, but maybe some of our folks who aren't as familiar, that's not happening. So could you talk about what's the policy and what we're charging and what's going on with that?
Yep, it's changed a little bit throughout this year based on the feedback that we've been getting. And so we also have heard that same feedback that you just shared. And so what we're doing right now is taking a really close look at where we go from here, where we go forward. So what we've done is where we've assessed the damage to the Chromebook. If it's accidental, it usually goes through the school process first. So the school personnel, the teachers, the staff there, the administrator, take a close look at that and determine if it's accidental versus intentional. That makes a very big difference. And then we also take a look at the individual family circumstances and also, what the age of the device is. So if it's an older device versus a newer device, all of those factors kind of come into play around what the consequences are around whether there's a charge, who pays that, and how that gets replaced. But we are in the process right now of taking a really close look at that. We're also benchmarking with other districts in Maryland to see how they handle that. We do know that there are other districts that charge, a lease fee of, say $20 for those, again, families that use the free and reduced meal services. Again, that's either prorated, discounted, or waived. But there is some kind of nominal lease fee for that. We have not charged that in the past. Again, there's pros and cons to that, but we are taking a look at what other districts do and trying to figure out how we, hold children, responsible for, the device if they have one in their care, but also ensuring that we do no harm in terms of ensuring everybody has one. That's not a reason to then be fearful of taking one, because we have heard that as well.
Well, yeah, I think this is something that I'd like to note that we need to come back to because, in the context of libraries, we've gone fine free. These devices are not going away, right? And now, part of this funding in Esser is for replacement costs. That's been up. We have some funding for that. What you've described, and it's not your fault, is just that's too loose, and it can be treated way differently depending on the school. And so we need like a really hard policy, I think, that has some flexibility given the circumstance. Your point, if you throw it against the wall on purpose and you've done that 3 times, that's different from, dropping it out of your backpack. But, so I'm glad you're looking in and benchmarking, but that's something I'd love to come back to because I would err on the side of not charging because, I've heard these can be in over $100 for some families. So it's not insignificant. And so I would like to come back to that at a regular E&C at some point. Yeah.
And just to clarify, we have definitely erred on the side of not charging versus charging, which then what we've seen is a dramatic increase in expenses around those repairs. Yeah. And so that's why we are looking at that benchmarking process to say, if we charge, what might that look like? But we don't necessarily have the appetite for charging. And so we've erred on not charging unless there has been some intentional stomping on my Chromebook as an action that needs some consequence.
No, I appreciate it. No, it's not difficult. It's just one of the many things we're going to have to figure out as we've transitioned through the pandemic. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
And if I
Thank
can-
you, Council. Go
sorry.
ahead.
I just
Mr.
wanted to
Danger.
mention briefly, that's obviously one component of, charges that families sometimes experience, but it's really important to note that all of our schools work with families to make sure that finances are not a barrier for students' participation in activities or obviously the resources that they need. So I just wanted to frame that broadly as well. But thank you for raising that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that warrants us as we again, and it's to your point, Councilmember Jawanda, when we're talking about how technology is not going away, this reliance upon Chromebooks and everything else has actually enhanced the educational experience, made it a lot easier for our kids. And so from that standpoint, it's not going to be something that we turn away from. So from that standpoint, setting a policy that works, that's future-proofed, is something that will certainly make sense for us. So we can discuss that this summer when we come back. I'd also like to, in closing, have us just talk, and Councilmember Jawanda brought this up a little bit, Councilmember Navarro did as well, in terms of just about some of the future planning now that now that we'll have budget behind us, in terms of projections when it comes to Esser funding and how that lets the school system continue to do what it needs to do, but also its plans for future expansion as we look to next year, so that as we have a new council that comes aboard, it would really be good to have some of this discussion already laid out in terms of what the vision is. And so I'd like to schedule something like that that really gives us a breath of kind of, now that we've got this behind us, where are we going with the system? What kind of programmatic changes, as Councilmember Navarro talked about, that are reflective of the community, do we need to continue to expand? Whether it's working with linkages to learning and other kinds of things, out of school time, working with immersion programs, doubling down on some of the things that we know are going to be enhanced with Kerwin and Blueprint. So it's all encompassed together. So I think that discussion will also involve the technological pieces that need to support those things as well. So it's all encompassed. So I think that'll be a good way for us to come back and kind of reset once budget's done sometime this summer. So we have a budget that's before us. That's the recommendation of council staff as approved by and recommended by the county executive, with the changes made with the tech mod for the $400,000. And I'll just ask for without objection on that. And hearing none, that budget is approved for this committee. Again, Mr. DeAndrea, please express your thanks. I know that Ms. Wolf and Dr. McKnight wanted to be here but couldn't due to scheduling conflicts. Please send to the entire board and to the superintendent our appreciation and thanks. We owe a debt of gratitude to all of your staff and administrators and school personnel who have continued to help us weather through the storm. We know that we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got close. And so from that standpoint, with these significant increases, we're looking to see more things continue to happen for our kids, akin to what we've seen over the past years of the pandemic. You guys have been amazing, and we look forward to continuing to see building upon that in the coming years. And we look forward to talking more in the summer. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, my colleagues. And of course, thank you to staff.